Good. The people will just continue to add, but let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to this webinar. Lots of very interesting things that are going on that we wanted to provide everyone with an update on. And as we go through these, we'll stop at the event when we've described it, and then open it up for questions. If you have any, you can just speak up, or you can raise your hand. That's a little trick you can play with your at the bottom on the toolbar, and we'll call on you. But just to get started, I'd like to tell everyone to put on their calendars, if you are available to participate. We're going to hold a 10th year anniversary rally in Washington, D.C. to celebrate and recognize the September 13th, 2016 rally outside of the White House that took place, where a couple of hundred Kratom activists gathered in order to start this fight. And this fight now is in its 10th year, when it was expected that it was going to end in 30 days. And of course, the Kratom community really made a huge difference in turning that battle around, because as everyone knows or remembers, that prior to that time, in 82 prior temporary scheduling recommendations published in the Federal Register by the Drug Enforcement Administration, there had never been a withdrawal, and hasn't been one since. And so we think that's a fantastic record to build on, and we continue the fight. It will be a 3-day event. We will start on September 13th, which is a Sunday this year. We hope to be able to get a permit to have our rally outside of the White House in Lafayette Park. There's some concern that there's some construction going on that we may have to relocate, but that's our goal. And that would be on Sunday afternoon as our kickoff. And then the following day, on Monday, we plan to schedule meetings with Trump administration officials to talk about the various components that each of these executive branch agencies have with the Kratom initiatives. And that includes the FDA, the DEA, the people at the National Institutes of Health with their research efforts. And we're going to do our best to be able to, at that time, brief them from our position about changes that need and ought to be made with respect to Kratom policy. We also will be focusing on veterans. And I can tell you that the inspiration for this really came as we got to hear from Drew Turner, who was in 2016 one of those fierce advocates for Kratom, and whose story about his ability to access Kratom as a veteran was fabulous. And he was one of our speakers at the congressional briefing that we just held a little while ago. And his impassioned testimony really was a motivating factor for all of us at the American Kratom Association. And we recognized that there are so many of veterans and other, first responders and people that really work in that area that sustain injuries related to their service to the public that are reliant upon Kratom, and we want to focus on them. And so we're going to schedule meetings with the Veterans Affairs Committees in both the House and the Senate. We hope that during these 3 days that we'll have the opportunity to participate in a hearing if we can get it scheduled. But at a minimum, we expect that we'll be able to brief up the leadership. We'll also have another congressional briefing focused again on veterans and why Kratom helps people so much. And that'll be, of course, a significant event to kind of inform offices about this kind of thing. And then we'll do office visits, as we always do for Capitol Hill visits. I know that I think Drew was on here, and Mark, if we can elevate Drew to being a panelist, I think it would be great just to let him say a couple of words. For those that weren't able to make the congressional briefing, that haven't had a chance to look at it, look at the video of it, you should, by the way. I'd like to have Drew just, if he's available, to say a couple of words here too. And by the way, his sacrifice in showing up there was really phenomenal, because he got mugged at the metro station on the first day of our event. And I think that the muggers learned that there's a veteran knows how to fight. And so I think they probably got more than they bargained for. But Drew, welcome. You have to unmute yourself, but I invite you to just say a few words if you could.
Thanks, Mac. I really appreciate that. I appreciated the opportunity to speak there in DC. Yeah, luckily the probably older teens that attacked me there that day uh, probably really weren't prepared for what happened anyway, so not a big issue. It was kind of over pretty quick. I was really excited to hear you guys were planning this 10th anniversary. Sadly, I'm going to be in Canada that week, and so I'm not going to be able to make it as much as I would love to be back in DC yet again. But I think it's amazing you guys are focusing on veterans. One of the big issues that the veteran community faces is some really tricky medical issues, both with mental and physical health, and having basically all the everything available. I was just speaking with Michigan State Senator Sam Singh early this week down in Lansing, and that was one of the big things we were talking about was that the veteran community has some really tricky issues that we deal with, both mental and physical health. And one of the big things that the VA and as well as DoD Medical has really started to try to look at is expanding the options that are out there. They're starting to explore psychedelic therapy for PTSD. They're really looking into a lot of things, and I think kratom it is probably a natural next step, especially for those like dealing with PTSD, some dealing with substance abuse issues that came about through their service. And so, yeah, I really appreciate all of what you guys are doing. Thank you.
Well, and thank you. I mean, obviously, it was a terrific reminder of the effort that you were involved in as one of the real planners and the instigators and the fierce advocates back in 2016. We will do everything we can if you're available to do something virtually that during that particular event to engage with you if your time allows when you're up in Canada. But thank you very much for your obviously service and all the work that you've done to be the real leader in this particular area. So I would encourage everyone to plan on those dates, September 13th to 15th. We're doing some logistical work. Don't book any tickets yet, but start planning. I would encourage everyone to get support from family and your creative networks in order to fund getting here. That was similar to what happened in 2016. We expect that there'll be more than we can accommodate in terms of helping with financial resources, and we want the vendors to really focus on getting some of the veterans here. That would be the focus. So it'll be a community event in terms of trying to help people fund their getting to DC, but we really look at that. We'll pull the trigger on the actual dates, and some of this, as I mentioned, is going to be dependent on getting the permit to actually do the rally in Lafayette Park, which may be restricted because of construction, but we'll find that out in the next couple of days, and then we'll let everyone know, and you can pull the trigger at that point. But start planning on it. We want to have a great crowd. We want to be able to go back and recognize what a magnificent effort that was started in 2016. And there are so many people that were involved in it. We're hoping to reach out to some of those who were initially involved in it to engage them and see if they'll participate. We know that there's people have gone different ways in the kratom community, and we understand that. But we think this is a unifying event that will really make a huge difference in not only recognizing where we've been, but to plot the next steps in order to make sure that we are moving in the right direction. Uh, let's move to sort of the purpose of this meeting, which is to bring everyone up to date on some critical issues that are impacting us. And there are a number of state issues that are obviously of significant concern to us. So I've invited a couple of the government affairs people that help us. That is a fancy term for lobbyist. When I first got involved in the lobbying game, my mother encouraged me to tell people that I worked as a piano player in a bordello because that was more reputable than being a lobbyist. But these are key people on the front lines, and I'll first invite Will Voorhees from Ohio to tell you about some details about what's going on in Ohio, because we know that's a critical issue for us in the state of Ohio. So, Will, I'll turn it over to you. And then when Will's completed with his description of where we are, then we'll invite any questions people might have specifically for it. And you can't curse at him. You can, but
That's fine.
be as kind as you can.
That sounds good. Thanks, Mac. Good evening, everyone. Will here, Dickinson Wright Law in Columbus today. We are continuing to deal with Ohio's lame duck governor, Mike DeWine, calling on his Board of Pharmacy to schedule kratom products. But there are a couple processes at play that I'll detail and kind of clear up some of the confusion. And to preface, just so everyone knows, many of you already know, if a state agency here in Ohio creates a rule, it has to go through a legislative body called JCAR, the Joint Committee on Agency Rule Review, made up of House and Senate members. And so they can invalidate any proposed rule, they can modify them. And really, the only way to get around that is to introduce an emergency rule, which takes effect immediately. JCAR can then invalidate afterwards. But unless it invalidates that emergency rule, it becomes effective after a certain time period. And in Ohio, we're dealing with two separate rulemaking packages, obviously. One that targets synthetic kratom. It proposes to schedule synthetic kratom. The governor issued an emergency rule here in late December of last year that took effect then, and it became permanent late last month in May, which prompted the latest activity, which I'll get to in a second. But separately, there is a separate rulemaking package for natural kratom that proposes to schedule natural kratom products that is currently pending at the Board of Pharmacy. And I will reference back to that in just a second. Also, there is pending legislation in Ohio, Senate Bill 299, House Bill 587. Both are identical and propose to regulate natural kratom products while prohibiting synthetics like 7-OH. And so the latest development came when JCAR allowed the synthetic kratom rule to take effect. In other words, they did not invalidate that rule. And that was because, and this is all in the public record, which I'll get to in a second, but that's because they had essentially a deal with the Board of Pharmacy where the board agreed not to move forward with the rule proposing to schedule natural kratom products if JCAR allowed the synthetic rule to take effect. Now, when a rule becomes effective in Ohio, an agency has to release guidance and instruct businesses how they should implement the rule. And that's where this all came to a head just in the last couple of weeks. So the Board of Pharmacy, when the permanent synthetic rule, the permanent synthetic kratom ban took effect, developed guidance, and again, not a rule, not a law. This is just an internal document instructing businesses on what to do in light of the new rule. But they developed guidance that went far beyond the rule and clearly banned natural kratom products. The guidance stated, you guys probably, a lot of you have seen it. It said you couldn't sell ground leaf natural kratom in a bag if it contained instructions or made clear that it was intended for human consumption. It didn't allow sales of natural kratom in capsule or drink form, even when the only ingredient listed was natural kratom. So in effect, this guidance document was using the synthetic rule to also ban natural kratom. And that backfired because it's ridiculous on its face. And a couple different outcomes emerged. So first of all, there was litigation that immediately followed that release of guidance. Two stores in Ohio, a couple others actually in a separate lawsuit, but two stores sued the Board of Pharmacy and the Department of Agriculture, seeking a temporary restraining order prohibiting the state from enforcing the synthetic kratom rule against natural kratom products. That was immediately granted by a Franklin County Court of Common Pleas. It issued the TRO. And again, the TRO prevents the board from confiscating products made from natural kratom, whether capsule, drink, or powdered form. Ultimately, those stores settled with the Board of Pharmacy. And the board has sort of agreed not to schedule natural kratom based on its synthetic rule. There are a lot of details I'm leaving out, but it essentially said this whole situation came from the Department of Agriculture that wanted to essentially weave in the state's food safety laws, which I'll get to in a second. But so that was the conclusion of the litigation. The latest there is that there is an amended complaint, same two stores, same case, but they are asking the court for a permanent injunction to prohibit the Department of Agriculture from confiscating kratom products unless they make specific findings required by law. For example, the product is adulterated, it's misbranded, it's an unreasonable risk to health and safety. And we expect to see a decision in the coming months. Now, as this litigation was happening, we were also making sure JCAR members were aware of what the board was doing, were aware of this guidance that was created that seemed to unilaterally ban natural kratom. And JCAR members actually were pretty offended by this. It's a clear separation of powers issue. The legislature makes the laws and rules, not state agencies. So they actually did take issue with this action, and they actually called the Board of Pharmacy in for a hearing just this past Monday, essentially to chastise the pharmacy board for taking those actions and for issuing that guidance. And I encourage folks to watch that hearing. All of what I just described was put on the public record by that committee chairman, Jamie Callender. And essentially, the conclusion was Chair Callender made clear that if the board did move forward with the natural kratom rule, that it would be subject to an invalidation vote at JCAR, which obviously is a layer of protection for our group. So the state of play right now is, one, you have a natural kratom rule ban pending at the Board of Pharmacy. Technically, it's in the Common Sense Initiative Office, which is supposed to conduct a business impact analysis on every rule to determine the impact on businesses across Ohio. They've received a lot of comments from businesses as part of the CSI process. So they're still reviewing those comments, and they could or could not proceed with that rule. So we'll see the schedule for the next meetings. They happen the first few days of each month. We'll see that agenda next Thursday to see if the natural rule is on the agenda. We suspect it will not be. We suspect the board's going to kind of back off at this point. But that natural rule technically is still pending. But you also have the synthetic rule still in effect, although JCAR at last Monday's hearing mentioned that they might bring the synthetic rule back before JCAR for reconsideration, considering this entire mess. But you have the TRO preventing the state from using the synthetic rule against natural kratom. And lastly, you have the two bills I mentioned earlier, Senate Bill 299 and House Bill 587 pending. We hope those will see action before the end of the year. And actually, legislators seem motivated to do so in light of all this recent activity. So Mac, I'll stop there. I think that covers the gambit, but I'm happy to take questions if anyone has them.
Yeah, Stephen asked this question. He said, I noticed the metrogenine/natural rule was in the Register of Ohio in progress with the Common Sense Initiative and whatnot, and now I can't find it anywhere in the register. Is this sloppy rulemaking, BOP trying to hide it, or did someone jump the gun and it shouldn't be there yet?
It could be all of the above. That they've done this sloppy rulemaking, as Mac has seen firsthand over the last better part of a decade. But to speak to that, I talked to the board today. They mentioned the CSI comment period is indeed closed. It had been extended, so they sought comments on both rules back in January, and they extended the comment period because they received far more comments on the natural kratom ban than they did for the synthetic ban. So that comment window stayed open a little bit, but it's closed now. That could be a reason for the discrepancy. If the rule is withdrawn, it's going to say sort of something next to the rule, so it wouldn't just be erased from the website. So I suspect there's some kind of technical difficulty there.
Okay, and then Archery asked, is there any action we should be taking?
Good question. So let's see what the board plans to do. We will check the agenda next Thursday because there's a small possibility there could be a public hearing, in which case we will seek additional comments and additional witnesses before the Board of Pharmacy. Aside from that, I would remain, if you are engaged with your state legislators. These bills are still getting considered at the Ohio State House. They will definitely be up for consideration in November and December during the lame duck months when the legislature passes dozens of bills and they store and archive all comments received. So please send emails, make calls to your legislator. And other than that, stay tuned for updates from our end.
Good. And then Brian asked the final question for you, Will. Let's see. Well, actually, there's two. Is the Ohio Department of Ag taking action on kratom products sold as drinks?
So, it's an interesting question. Technically speaking, the Department of Agriculture has taken completely misguided stances on kratom and has embargoed product under faulty legal pretenses in the past. They actually claim that kratom is an unlawful food additive and brings forward the state's food safety laws as justification for their actions. So because the amended complaint in that litigation is pending, technically they could continue to try to confiscate product under the guise of the state's food safety laws, although we think that is highly unlikely considering there's pending litigation and considering the entire agency saw what happened at JCAR with the Board of Pharmacy. So if they attempted to do something, there could be legislative ramifications also. Last thing I'll say about that is that the TRO makes clear that natural kratom in drink form is lawful in Ohio. So aside from sort of some interesting legal theory on food safety, you're lawfully able to sell those products.
Great. And just to emphasize that for everyone, that was part of the agreement that was reached in the litigation. There were two separate lawsuits, one filed by businesses that we recruited, and the AK funded the lawsuit. And then there was a separate lawsuit with GKC where they were looking to be more specific about the beverage product that they promote, and that was successful as well. So I think that what Will just described is correct, that the Department of Agriculture would sort of be on a tricky ground if they tried to play a game with enforcement while this second action is now pending against them, which has been filed. And I don't know if there's a second lawsuit by GKC with the Department of Ag. I think it's just us right now. Will, is that correct?
I think that's correct. Need to confirm, but I do think that's correct.
Yeah. So then the last thing, and I can help answer this, Barbara asked, please explain why vendors still have Ohio residents blacklisted from purchasing natural kratom. Because they haven't gotten the word, Barbara, that we were successful here, and it's good protection for them not to be selling if they have a question. But certainly this litigation opened the door for natural kratom leaf products to be restored for sale in the state of Ohio, with the additional clarification we're seeking in the second piece of litigation here against the Department of Agriculture. So, Will, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you covered it, Mac.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming on and taking time out of your evening to share with all of us that perspective on Ohio. It's deeply appreciated, and we'll let you get back to your family affairs or whatever.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. So let's go to Terry. He's out in California, has been fighting the California Department of Public Health and working with the legislature for the last couple of years. And of course, California is a trick bag always. But I'll turn it over to Terry to kind of describe what the current state of affairs are and there in California and what our next steps might be.
Yeah. 20 states, including California, do not have any laws regulating kratom. We put together legislation, AB 1088, run by one of the two physicians in the legislature, not only a physician and addiction specialist. And 1088 allowed the sale of pure leaf kratom, outlawed 7-OH, and created some restrictions on age gating and packaging. We made real progress. We took it through two committees. In the two committees, we were 14-0 on a vote, obviously unanimity, Republicans and Democrats. And in the Health Committee, on the Assembly side, we were 7-0. We took it to the floor. We got off the Assembly floor 76-0. We then we were working with the narcotics officers and a large group of law enforcement folks who supported 1088. Because the retail food code only applies to retail food facilities, CDPH did not have the authority on the sale of specific ingredients of our products. And so what happened was almost a dozen local communities replicated what was allowed in 1088. We then go to the Senate side. We have a Senate here, an informational hearing that was mostly very positive. And we had the expectation that the doctor on the Senate side and a positive analysis for the most part, that the Baines bill would go through. Unfortunately, it went south at the last minute. And the reasoning was, as they wrote, that permitting sales of kratom is counter to current positions of the FDA. A comprehensive regulatory structure around kratom products may signal that the state deems these products to be sufficiently safe for those 21 years of age or older, with an acceptable level of risk for dependence or misuse. So while the state had ascertained that it could be done, there was the problem with the FDA. Given that the FDA has determined there is insufficient safety data to support the marketing of kratom products, even as dietary supplements, it may be premature for the state to take a position. This bill would put the state of California in the position of authorizing the sale of products both the FDA and CDPH have determined cannot be legally sold. It was a lousy last minute that came through. It was unexpected. We had been having very positive discussions with staff. What the decision was is that if the FDA was not going to rule on this, that California did not want to get ahead of the FDA on it. Puts us in a ticklish position, obviously. What to do about it? We represent the largest group of veterans in the state of California. There is a psychedelic therapy piece of legislation that has just been amended. Our veterans believed in it and yesterday sent a letter of support for it. We are going to reach out to the former chair of the Senate Health Committee, who is a veteran herself, and start moving forward with the fact that the veterans being to join forces with the law enforcement groups we have to move forward with a Baines bill that I also want to say was amended at the end to be even stronger than it was on the Assembly side. We're also going to have Dr. Baines, if she will agree. Was not available as we get through the last bit of bills before they go to the second house in California, to send a letter to CDPH along with the letter from Dr. Gupta, with whom she is friendly, asking CDPH to stop this wholesale closing or of kratom sales, of pure leaf kratom sales in the state of California, until we have a statewide policy in place. So that's pretty much where we are.
Yeah, and I think what Terry highlighted is the challenge that we've had in a number of states and local jurisdictions where you have uh, the FTA's webpage, FTA and Kratom webpage, which includes some confusing, poorly crafted, and certainly not statutorily authorized guidance on Kratom that has led to many of these states and localities just claiming that they have authority because of the interrelationships between their state food laws and the FDA food laws. And that's what gives them, they believe, their authority. So we're attempting to do our best to unwind those things and those beliefs, but it's clearly going to take a significant effort to get the California Department of Public Health to abandon their current initiative where they're after kratom. A lot of this is confused by the very strong belief of these staffers and policymakers that the distinction between natural kratom leaf and the 7-OH is not something they understand, and they would just as soon ban all of it rather than take the risk that they're going to leave bad products on the marketplace. And that's something, as all of you know, we have to navigate around all of the time. So, Terry, thank you for that update. And we obviously are working hard. And even as we speak, we're having discussions with the FDA about the impact of the FDA and Kratom webpage and why it needs to be modified. And certainly should, if they insist on maintaining that language, be required to go through the Administrative Procedures Act, which would take rulemaking and getting comments from stakeholders, including consumers, medical professionals, scientists, and vendors that would be able to inform that policy. So, Terry, thank you. We'll stay tuned. We hope to get something done on the federal level as we move forward here.
Thank you, Mac. And I know I've been bugging you like crazy on the FDA stuff. You want to punch me in the nose sometimes, and I don't blame you. But I do appreciate all the hard work you did on the Dr. Gupta component, because it really did make a difference in policymakers to delineate between pure leaf kratom and 7-OH, and is really resulting in a change of position from the 7-OH people too, that, any marketing that they could do would distance themselves, no longer conflating it with a kratom product. But
Right.
thank you, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Well, hang in with me just a minute. I got a couple of questions here that I didn't notice, but one is, what does this mean for e-commerce? Can you still ship natural kratom to California?
It's a tricky question, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's you're you're at risk when you do it, and it really is a matter with your legal counsel to figure that out. But under the Department of Public Health's position, all kratom is adulterated and therefore banned. And so you're just in a weird zone here moving forward. Then
And
Stephen
I
asks,
get the frustration. I mean, it's recognized even in the analysis that CDPH is probably overreaching. But the language that FDA put out there, it is scurrilous that after all this work that they would still say that there's currently inadequate information to provide reasonable assurances that even pure leaf kratom does not present a significant or unreasonable risk of illness or injury. And that's been a crisis.
yeah, and I think if you look at interestingly, the very experience that the kratom community went through in the federal court in the Southern District of California, when the vendor that was importing kratom into the United States was cited by the Department of Justice, and when they went at the end of the trial after the vendor had pled guilty, the judge asked the question uh, because it was relevant to sentencing as to how dangerous kratom was, and requested that the FDA present themselves with experts and documentation, what's called a Brady hearing, in order to explain to the judge why the danger level of kratom was significant enough to impose a sentence that would be appropriate to the marketing of a dangerous product. And the FDA officially, on the record, declined. And this would have been in, trying to remember, it was February of 2024, I believe, when this occurred. And they said that the FDA said, we are not available to come to this hearing because we, the FDA, have not yet determined whether kratom is dangerous or not. That was a stunning admission. And think about that record, that court record that's there, and you have the Department of Public Health in the state of California saying kratom's dangerous because the FDA says it is. And that's the inference drawn from the FDA and kratom webpage. So I think that it's perplexing. And Stephen asked the question here, Terry, that is equally confounding. It said, what should advocates be saying if local bans come up while AB 1088 is not moving? I've been recommending to make a local original AB 1088 like ordinance or wait for the next, he's recommending that, or wait until the state. Since AB 1088 has changed and not moving, I'm not quite sure what best practices would be.
I think any time with local entities to engage in the discussion and to advocate for 1088, either in its present form or as it was introduced.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly the right answer. Then Adam, and this is one I can field, has the FDA given an actual reason as to why they haven't adjusted the website despite everything that's happening because of it? Adam, that's a great question because under the statute, if the FDA's action is foreseeably going to result in a policy issue being evaluated by a local or state government, whether it's the legislative or executive branch, then it is the obligation of the FDA to conduct the Administrative Procedures Act requirements for rulemaking. You can't just put guidance out there if you know that they're going to misapply that guidance as being the actual regulation, statutory authorized regulation by the FDA, by the FDA. So that's the problem. And the FDA at this point, in trying to, as we've been given reports from FDA staff, that the reason why the staff at the FDA is resisting making the changes that we think are required, and despite the fact that they know that the FDA language is being used or misused by local governments or state governments, they said that the people that are the internal career staff are saying that they believe that a change would give the impression that the FDA is endorsing kratom. Now, they've had no problem with the FDA leaving the impression that they're demonizing it, but now all of a sudden they're getting righteous and saying, oh, we don't want there to be any misinterpretation of the position of the FDA. So that's what we're currently discussing. And I mean currently meaning right now, in the last couple of days, we've been heavily engaged in these discussions. So and we're going to continue and hopefully get a good outcome along the way. So that's the answer, Adam. And the lawyers are also concerned about the framing of the language and whether if they just make a change to the language, will that trigger a requirement for them to restart, which restart's an interesting word. They never initially did it, the actual rulemaking under the Administrative Procedures Act. So our view is if that's their position, withdraw the guidance completely and start from scratch and then let the void exist. That's the thing they're concerned about. So that's the remainder of that. So now, Terry, you truly can be excused. We apologize.
All right. Nice to meet everybody.
Thank you so much. So let me go back on our agenda. Florida. Everyone knows, or you likely have heard, that the Florida Attorney General reissued the emergency rule on the 7-OH products. There are a couple of noteworthy things about that. First, it was surprising to me that I heard repeated reports about how the AG had simply shot its wad. I mean, there's no way they could do anything more about this when, in fact, if you read the statute that governs this, the only limitation on the Attorney General issuing a new emergency rule in order to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Florida consumers is that the rule has to be substantially different than the first one. And I heard repeatedly from the 7-OH people that they were ready to flood the state, that they had millions of packages of products sitting on the border. We heard a lot of that chatter at the Champ Show in Las Vegas recently. We surprisingly heard it from some of the people that I consider to be, unfortunately, apologists for the 7-OH industry on the Kratom Gal Show and some others, where they were saying, oh, well, there's there's going to be 708s now available in the state of Florida without even reading or thinking about what the powers that the Attorney General had. The reason why the emergency rule was not codified in the statute is an interesting political thing, and it's not because of the policy issue. And that interesting political thing is that at the time that the legislation was going through, which included the codification of the emergency rule on 7OH, the 7OH industry had retained a particular lobbyist that had a very good working relationship, and some say beyond a good working relationship, in the context of an allegation of a long-standing affair between the lobbyist and the Speaker of the House. And because the 7OH people had retained this lobbyist, the word was that the attorney or the Speaker of the House was going to pull the actual language that would have imposed this, formalized this rule and codified in the state statute. It's hard to figure that out. That was a report that was given in one of the political rags that a frustrated member of the House, complained about that relationship and the inappropriateness of that lobbyist being able to get the speaker to do things that were really grounded in personal relationships as opposed to good policy. But notwithstanding that, the Attorney General, and even if that had nothing to do with it, the Speaker was rumored to be interested in running for Attorney General. So that might have also been a potential motivation for that decision. But nonetheless, it put consumers at risk for allowing these dangerous products, as been obviously been defined by the FDA and HHS in the form of their 8-factor analysis, which they have submitted, or at least the 3 factors that deal with the safety of 7OH products, and that's being reviewed by the DA right now. So what we had was a political situation in the state of Florida. But now this new rule, which is allowed by statute and will take effect and remain in effect until the end of the next legislative session next year, and so is something that the 7OH people should have been aware of, despite their bragging, and certainly some of the apologists for the 7OH people should have at least not gotten their tongues out ahead of the truth on this kind of thing. But people like to talk and give their opinions, however uninformed they are. So today we have this rule that went into effect. There are some people in the 7OH community that think that there was an error made, however inadvertently, on some of the language about that rule, which would allow for a loophole to permit some 7OH or the MGM 14 and 15 products to be on the market. And I'm certain that the Attorney General will exercise whatever discretion they have to plug that loophole as soon as it's identified, to the extent that it's legitimate. So the Florida rule is in effect. It will remain in effect till the end of the legislative session. And the way that the Florida legislative process works, the current speaker is term limited and gone. And so there will be a new Speaker of the House in the next session, and we think that it'll be a more reasonable review of what the rule says, and hopefully will get codified into law. And then, of course, we want a stronger framework for regulations in the state of Florida on natural kratom leaf products and extracts going forward. So, anybody have any questions on Florida that I can try to answer? I'm just looking through these quickly. Okay, I don't see any new questions on that. Next issue is to talk about the Georgia informational hearing that was held by the Georgia Blue Ribbon Commission, appointed by the Georgia Speaker of the House, which included and allowed for our nemesis, Chairman Rick Townsend, chairman of this commission, to convene a set of hearings. And his plan, as he described it to me in the first hearing, was to hold at least 4 hearings around the state. I think anyone who looked at and watched the first hearing that was held by this Blue Ribbon Commission could not have characterized it anything different than it being a completely stacked deck against the kratom community. And I think that the fascinating thing about this is that when you talk to Rick Townsend, he acts like he's shocked that you we would suggest that this is in any way unfair. But any reasonable person would see it exactly for what it was. He selected witnesses that he knew were going to get the message out that he wanted delivered. And by the way, very little messaging that related to the youth access or exposure to kratom products. It was all about his narrative, which is to ban kratom, and it was certainly was a horrible experience from that standpoint. Townsend had specifically invited, hard to say who invited whom, but Andrew Kolodny showed up. For those of you that do not know Andrew Kolodny, you need to know him because he cut his teeth on creating probably the worst crisis in America when he went after the opioid prescription medication issue, and he made his fortune in becoming an expert witness in trials against the opioid manufacturers. He consulted the government entities and was, by some description, the architect of the reduction in prescription medication restraints that were placed by the government on physicians on what they were allowed to prescribe to paying patients. And he ultimately was a consultant for the local governments and state governments that wanted to get settlement funds from the opioid manufacturers. And all of that is amazing. And all the while, there are serious questions that have been raised by people who are very familiar, much more than me, this whole situation where he was actually fronting for the Suboxone people. So I think that this is a real interesting situation that we're facing there in Georgia. Chair Townsend refused to allow me to testify, claiming that he was going to offer me that opportunity in the next hearing, where he had scheduled a strong anti-kratom advocate, and he thought it'd be an interesting debate when that happened. So we'll see how that plays out. But I think that the Chair Townsend is being unfair. I think he's clueless about what an understanding of that term means, because he acts like it's no big deal. You know, he's just trying to do his job, and he doesn't care that he hasn't focused on the purpose of this commission, nor does he care much about what the messaging that he has facilitated with the stacked witnesses. There were two things that I thought were very significant that sort of went through this process. First is that Dr. McCurdy made a very strong case which contradicted the position of Kolodny directly on the safety profile of kratom. There is no doubt that the Kolodny message was outdated, relied on poor science, outdated science, but yet that's what his messaging is sort of significant for. And I thought Dr. McCurdy made an excellent presentation, and he put some real perspective on it. And secondly, Dr. William Crandall from Emory University addressed one of the major arguments that the 7-OH people are making today, which is that this whole nonsense about that the AKA and other critics of 7-OH, that the human liver does the very same thing that they do in their manufacturing process, in that metrogeny converts to 7-OH and pseudodoxil. By their claim, 25 to 30% of it transfers. And Dr. Crandall made a fascinating presentation where he described that the metabolism of the metrogeny through the human liver occurs so slowly that at the peak levels on the blood testing throughout that process, it never comes close to what the 7-OH levels are in the adulterated and the chemically manipulated products that they produce. And so this nonsense that gets peddled by the 7-OH community, largely by Michelle Ross, who promotes it, and then all the lobbyists try to say it, it's ridiculous stuff. And so we're going to be providing some real good data on that. But thanks to Dr. Crandall for that. So I'm going to stop here. I see that Soren's got his hand raised. Soren, you can unmute yourself and speak here and make whatever point you want to make. I'm going to make sure that I'm doing this right too, so that you can speak. Can you unmute yourself and speak, Soren? So raise your hand again and see if I can unmute you at that point. So let me see. Okay, I think you can talk now. You have to unmute yourself.
I think I did it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Alrighty. So kind of stepping back, I was late to get my hand up, but I had a question with regard to the Florida bill, and that's specifically with regards to what your thoughts are, given that it is placed in the Schedule 1 and the Florida penalties for Schedule 1 of possession of over 10 grams of an admixture of something on the Schedule 1 can get someone in jail for up to, or prison rather, for up to 30 years. What your thoughts are on that, if you fear that there might be a Marshall Price like situation that might stem from this, if you think that this is going too far, if you think that further KCPA should balance how you regulate kratom and kratom alkaloid products so that there are not criminal penalties for consumers. Just your thoughts on how this is being, consumers are being punished in the state of Florida.
So my personal view is that I do not favor punitive penalties on consumers. That it's just a hard thing for me. But the construct of the federal law with respect to the Controlled Substances Act and these state laws, which generally mirror the penalty structure for the Federal Controlled Substances Act, these are very harsh penalties that are imposed on people that are engaged in this. And I think that the only balancing act that occurs, and not likely will you find it much in Arkansas, for example, where the court system is heavily, or Alabama for that matter, where they tend to be far too punitive. I would think that the courts can obviously exercise some judgment here. But overall, I'm not a fan of this. But the reality is that you have to balance it against the arrogance and the unbelievable unwillingness of the 7-OH community to do anything other than just push their product out for profit. That's all they're about. And there has to be a reality check where consumers recognize that when they pick up a product intentionally for the purpose of it's a controlled product, intentionally for the purpose of consuming it, that there is a risk associated with that. I don't like the punitive nature of this, but that's sort of the reality of what we have to deal with. Our KCPA in the federal KCPA and our state KCPAs do not assess these kinds of penalties, criminal penalties against people. We try to focus on the distributors, the manufacturers and distributors, and the retailers who intentionally do this. We think that's the far better way to do it.
Thank you. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no problem. I know it's a difficult issue, and we saw what happened in Alabama with terrible outcomes and dragging people through. There's another case in Alabama that we're helping with now, where a woman was stopped in the same circumstance as Shayna had, and has been pending for 3 years. And just out of the blue, got a notice to show up. This was on a Thursday, to show up the following Monday. She happens to live in Florida, in order to show up for court, and scrambling to get information. The court had, the public defender that had been assigned to her case just hadn't communicated. I mean, it's a mess. And so you see that kind of thing happen, and you just have to scratch your head and say what a mess it is. But hopefully we can avoid that going forward and have a more rational policy. Right.
So with the realization that the criminal penalties are starting to stack up, does this cause you to reflect or want to change the direction of which the AKA is pushing against some of these isolated alcoholic products? Is there sort of an invigoration within you or anyone at the GKC that you might be working with to try to put more effort to come to table with 7-hydroxy people I'm not trying to cast blame and say that y'all are not coming to the table before anything. I don't really know what's going on in the background. But for me, this is just a shocking realization that, it's hypothetical. Lives may be ruined with hyperpotent kratom products or kratom isolate products, or kratom alkaloid isolate products. But with this law, it seems now for a fact that lives will be ruined simply under possession. And if there's any motivation now to try to resolve these differently so as to save people from being forced through the criminal justice system. And this is just a further perpetuation of a failed war on drugs at this point.
So I would disagree with the assessment that these are hypothetical risks associated with 7-OH products. I think they're far beyond hypothetical. But to your point, would there be a method or some pathway for there to be a modification of the AKA's position with respect to the 7-OH industry? And I can tell you that we tried. I sat down and I worked with Jonathan Miller, who's the general counsel for the Heart Group, and with Vince Sanders, and they looked me in the eye and they told me two things, which were the conditions upon which we reached an agreement and signed the agreement, despite the criticism within the industry, which was that that they, one, had the science that was necessary in order to have market entry that would show that the specific product formulations and the serving sizes that were attendant to them had been documented with safety data. That was the first thing. Second is they would stop calling their products kratom. That was in, I believe, it was in October of 2024. And then in the first week in January, at a leadership summit meeting we held in Miami, Florida, we invited their chief science officer to come, and he said, "We have no science, did not have any science, and we're hoping to get the science." And he described their pathway for it. And when it was pointed out to him that that was a violation of federal law, he said, "I can't control these people because I'm just the scientist that's been, taking my instructions on what we need to do next." When someone will sit and lie, and that we terminated that agreement immediately because they lied. And the other thing they didn't do, even if they had the market basis, which they didn't, the question was, were they trying to stop the marketing of products as kratom when they're 7-OH? And they didn't do a lick of that. And when I met with them to try to resolve this issue, and I tried, they said, "Oh, the FDA requires us to call it kratom." They said that with a straight face. I was in a room with 60 7-OH manufacturers. We were required by law to list our products as kratom. There's a legal term for that. It's called bullshit. And they know it, but they didn't care. And what they were talking about was they are required to list the content in the label of metrogeny. That's all they're doing. It didn't require them to label their product as an advanced kratom alkaloid to market it as kratom. They did that because they were deceiving consumers. So my view, Soren, is you bring someone to the table and they spit in my eye and lie to my face over and over and over again. I have a hard time trusting anybody in that side of the table. And when later that year, when Vince Sanders was asked by a reporter specifically, did you have any safety data? He then confessed. He said, "No, we didn't, but we're using our market, the number of consumers who are purchasing our products, as our safety data." That's calling people guinea pigs. So yeah, I'm having a hard time even getting my arms around the idea that I could sit down in the same room with people that lie to me over and over and over again and say, "Oh, it's okay, lie to me again, and let's have a discussion." They don't want to have a discussion. And then I sit and I hear, I've forgotten his name, Mr. Beckham, who is one of the co-founders of Outpost Brands, testify down in the state of South Carolina in a legislative hearing, and his description of playing semantic games on what a synthetic product was versus a semi-synthetic. And he told the legislators, "Your bill already bans synthetic products. Our product is not synthetic." Well, that's a game that you're playing semantically, because the truth is it's a chemically manipulated opioid, because you flip the content of the products. And then here's their latest game. They're testifying in various committee hearings in legislatures where they say, "Oh, well, the the human liver converts at 25 to 30% of the metrogeny into 7-OH and then follow on pseudodoxil. That is true. But what they leave out is that the liver metabolism process is so slow that you never get to blood plasma levels after that metabolism occurs of a 7-OH content that ever gets close to what 7-OH products do. And of course, they've abandoned 7-OH products going through your gut, and they now make them to be fast dissolving tablets. I'm not going to sit down and look these people in the eye and say, oh, go ahead, step on me again, kick me in the face, spit in my eye, and say it's okay. So is there a possibility that we could have a discussion like that? I don't know with whom. There's not a person that I have met that I could trust on that side of the table. So that's the
yeah. Thank you for that. This is just the last thing. I don't want to take up too much of your time, and I really appreciate your very thorough responses to my questions so far. And I, am praying that you're able to have sort of the kumbaya moment that y'all had with the GKC and are able to figure out something that will be able to work together after a lot of headbutting over the years. But so I guess my final question is, since the AKA is an organization which represents consumers, and there are a lot of crossover between natural kratom consumers and kratom alkaloid isolate consumers as well. If you have the ability to push state legislators, regulators at any level away from stacking on criminal penalties to when you create these regulation restrictions for what products can and can't be sold in areas. And if you would just be willing to, I guess, commit to pushing for non-consumer penalties and any forthcoming battleground states.
Yeah, I think that there's room for discussion on that because, as I said earlier, I personally do not favor criminal penalties on consumers. And so I think that there's some room for discussion on that. We'd have to find some legitimate basis to have a discussion where we could do that. I can tell you that the example you raised about the détente that's been reached with the GKC, it's because at the other side of on the other side of that table, it's good faith people trying to get to the same objective. And despite our very strong disagreements, we got there. So if anybody wants to say, oh, it's just, the AK's stubbornness or Haddo's stubbornness, that's not fair because we've shown that people that had very strong disagreements were able to resolve those differences and look to the greater good. And I think that opportunity is still available with the 7-OH side. I just don't know who the person would be because I can tell you who it's not. I can tell you that it's not Cleveland, it's not Sanders, it's not the people from 7-Ohms. It's not certainly not Schwerman and Beckham, and it's not Michelle Ross. I don't know who's left that could have that discussion because none of them seem to be capable of embracing the concept that when you talk, that you actually are able to find some common basis of understanding without flat out lying about what you're doing or not going to do, that kind of thing. So it's a little hard. But I've in my experience in 50 years in Washington, D.C., I've seen bigger obstacles overcome. So maybe it's still possible, but it would take some significant, and I mean really significant, changes in behaviors by these people on the 7-OH side. That's the best I can tell you. Moving on, thank you, Soren, very much. I've always respected your viewpoint. I understand the position that you are in, and you're not a player here where there's been any kind of mistrust because you've always been straight up, and I appreciate that very much going forward. So moving on, there are a couple of things that are also going on right now, a couple of states where we're seeing movement, and we obviously want to work with those states. Delaware was an example. There's some real questions about how the Delaware bill could get through testing, which from the House hearing that was held, questions arose from the executive branch agencies about their capability to test. We have been unsuccessful to date. We hope that we can move them, that there is a way to get valid testing results that are available from an independent third-party lab that's certified that would lose their certification if they monkeyed with the results that could be relied upon by the state enforcement agency. We haven't found concurrence on that yet, but we're working on it. We've got a new bill up in Pennsylvania that it's not perfect, but I'm telling you, it's so much better than what it was a month ago in terms of where they were headed. So I think that that's something that we're continuing to work on. We're still seeing North Carolina is moving legislation. We're seeing that Massachusetts potentially is going to be at play here. So lots of things that we're trying to work on, and we're aware of some pending initiatives with boards of pharmacy outside of the state of Ohio. We know that the pharmacy board in Nevada took very strong action from their workshop to unanimously recommend that that they schedule kratom in the state of Nevada. But I think we're in really good shape there because we've been pushing hard. State of Washington is very similar, that kind of thing. So I think we can. Any specific questions? I see that Adam has his hand raised. I'm going to allow you to talk, Adam. I think I figured this out. So Adam, you can just unmute yourself and you're good to go. So Adam, hopefully he can overcome this. If you unmute, I think I'll try it again. Yeah, I've already says talking permitted. So I'll give you one more shot here, Adam, if you can. Can you hear me, Adam? We cannot hear you. So I'll try. I'll go back and see if you raised the question in. Yeah, Adam did ask a question about Delaware. There are 3 days left in the session. Senate's meeting tomorrow. We're aware of that. We're reaching out to them. So I hope that's the answers that part of the question. One more time, Adam, can you hear us? And if you unmute yourself, I think you should be able to talk. Okay, I'm not getting any luck with Adam. So now Misty has asked, Razor. Misty, you can speak.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, if that was Adam Sweeb, was that him that was trying to answer?
Yes.
Okay, I think he's probably going to talk about what they were talking about with the testing thing in Delaware. Hold on. It was regarding separation of whole leaf kratom powder and 7-OH. It had nothing to do with the testing of the products. It was them saying that they didn't have any equipment to differentiate the two.
Right. And that's why I recommended, and we've talked to the sponsor about reassuring them that by having a lab certified independent lab giving them the results, that they would then be able to decide whether the formulation of the product met the specifications in the statute. A little tricky, but we're trying to work with it.
Okay. Hopefully, Adam, that's what you were trying to answer. So I got you, buddy.
All right. Adam will give you one more shot at this. When Misty has to be your whisperer, you know that you're going to have to owe her for that. Okay, I think Adam's having some kind of problems. Let me see if I need to. So Adam, that last chance. I'm doing my best here, but it says that you are allowed to talk and you just have to speak up on your end. Might be a technical problem with your equipment there. So that said, we'll move on. The next item I wanted to talk about is some questions that I've received that people are just curious about, and I'm glad to answer these things. First is, can I explain what the End Kratom Misinformation website is about? If you have not looked at that website, it is the endkratommisinformation.org. It is our effort to really start pushing hard against the misinformation that's being circulated across the board about advocates that are trying to oppose the American Kratom Association, and they're either trying to ban kratom entirely or they're trying to find a pathway for 7-OH products to be viewed as being acceptable. And I've addressed that when I had the discussion with Soren about that and some of the problems that I foresee with that. But certainly that's something that is of interest. So go visit that, the End Kratom Misinformation. It's got, we think, some good content in it, and it will help you. And we're going to continue to roll out more information, both in the form of videos, and we're going to start putting documents up there that address some of the things that are happening. As an example, and this is sort of resource constraint, but I watched the testimony of Andrew Kolodny in the Suffolk County legislative hearing, and I was infuriated at the end. And so that'll be one of the topics that we're going to be addressing, his whole narrative that he had both down in Georgia and in Suffolk County. And he's going to be every place he can because he's obviously on a mission here to work on this. So go to endkratommisinformation.org and you'll see that content, and we'll continue to update it. Secondly, I was asked, or a statement was made, you've raised questions about Patty Wheeler's claims that her son died of kratom only. What is the evidence? Now, I get it that there are some who believe that that these parents or family members who believe that kratom alone killed their child or their spouse or family member. I do not question at all the belief that these family members have. They're entitled to that belief. But Patty Wheeler, who is the mother of a son who was attending school in Texas, and at the time of his attending school, started using a kratom product by her description, and that he had been using it for about 6 weeks, and that he died of a massive amount or a significant amount of kratom that caused a seizure, and that her belief that kratom was the cause of the death was affirmed by the medical examiner in that case, who said that it was 100% kratom and that there were antihistamines in his system, but those had dissipated by the end of the day, and that it was kratom that really caused his death. And there likely was not any interaction or any interplay with those drugs. I suspect, and I'm giving the benefit of the doubt here, that the discussion between the mother and the medical examiner appropriately would have been part of a post-mortem investigation discussion where family members are entitled to provide their opinions and evidence that informs a medical examiner's opinion. But the one thing that is absolutely true, and it contradicts exactly in everything that Patty Wheeler has been spreading around the country, including at the Florida Attorney General's press conference where she was invited to be a speaker, and she's done it in Utah and in Michigan and a number of other states where she has peddled this nonsense that it was kratom only. When I say nonsense, I don't mean she doesn't believe it. I'm telling you that the evidence doesn't support it, because if you look at the tox screen that is a part of the autopsy, which we obtained through a Freedom of Information Act from the medical examiner's office in Texas, there are 10 substances that are listed that are quantifiable on the tox screen. Kratom was tested as positive but not quantifiable. So the idea that you have a potential death caused by a massive amount of kratom ingested by the decedent immediately prior to his death, it would show on the tox screen. It did not. It tested positive. Non-quantifiable means that it wasn't much there at all. And the flip side of what Patty Wheeler was saying, that the medical examiner told her that there was a little bit of antihistamine, that medical examiner would not have said that, could not have said that, except that it was from a tox screen. So I just doubt the recollection that Patty Wheeler has of the discussion that she apparently had with the medical examiner. And I can tell you that Patty Wheeler has made herself into a crusader here. She produced a documentary through a friendship she has with a Hollywood producer. She invited me to participate in that documentary and told me specifically that this was not going to be a hit job on kratom. It was only to encourage there to be good information about kratom and to look at good regulations. And she even restated that up to 4 days before she went to the state of Utah, sat on the floor of the Utah State Senate with Mike McKell, the state senator who was leading the charge to ban kratom. And she all of a sudden became a convert within that 4 days to being a full kratom ban. And she went on a couple of television interviews, and one news reporter asked her directly, "Are you absolutely certain that it was kratom that killed your son?" And she said 100%, and the coroner told me so, or the medical examiner told her so. That can't be true, because and if it is, it's certainly completely goofy for the medical examiner to have made a statement like that, given the evidence that's in the tox screen. So I think that that's the reason. I know this was a little pointed issue or question that was raised about Patty Wheeler, but it's the reality, and frankly, something's going to have to be resolved. And Patty Wheeler is now touring the country with Dean Francis, who is the Virginia advocate who formed the End Kratom Addiction group, and along with Mike McKell, and they're just bouncing around, all promoting this idea of a kratom ban. And so there's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of inaccurate information, not the least of which is with Senator Mike McKell, who sat before a legislative hearing trying to convince the committee to approve of his ban on kratom, and told them that in the course of his testimony that they could not give any weight to the FDA dose finding study because that study was funded by industry. And noticing the skepticism of the member of the Utah House of Representatives who asked the question, he then doubled down at the end of his testimony, held up his phone dramatically, and said that he had phoned a friend, and that the friend had verified that this was a study that was conducted with industry funding, not the federal government funding it. I don't know who in the world he called. Maybe it was Andrew Kolodny. I don't know. But it's wrong. And I could forgive, and anyone else should forgive, if it were just a misstatement of fact. But he knew at the end of the testimony that he was wrong. Certainly knew afterwards because we told him. And has he ever once corrected it with the body of legislators that he said it to? No. This is what's happening with this anti-kratom movement that's going through. So we are working hard. I said on one of the End Kratom Misinformation videos that I did that Mike McKell was described by one of his colleagues to me, who said that he's a media hound, that he would climb to the top of the Mount Everest and kiss an albino yak on the lips if he felt there was a news camera there. And I think that that's been evidenced by some of the conduct that Senator McKell has had. So we're going to be back in Utah with the truth, and we're going to hopefully reverse that he didn't get his ban bill, but he got an onerous point of sale restriction that we think needs to be resolved. So we're going to work hard on that. We've got a lot of challenges ahead of us, but we're going to work on all of these things as we go forward. I'm going to go back quickly and review some of the issues. Dan asked if I could summarize what I said about Florida. Dan, this has been recorded. It will be up on the YouTube channel tomorrow. You can come back and see it and review it, and then send me any questions you might have. Tracy says New York just passed a ban on synthetics. Do you know of anything preventing the governor from signing it? I do not. I think that that's, if it hasn't happened, it will, because I think she agrees that the governor agrees that we should, we should obviously keep that 7OH ban in place. Adam asked, he said, he has no idea why it's not working. Just want to let people know that we have to message the Senate immediately. I think that's out on our alert. And I think GKC has an alert out. So absolutely, Adam's right. You have to communicate tonight or first thing in the morning at the latest to the Delaware Senate that you support the 21 age restriction, and that there should be a resolution to the testing issue. Mara asks, Michigan entering the chat. Thank you for what you do. Well, that's just a thank you. Thank you for recognizing it. John asked about the Kansas ruling, and all Kansas products are banned. They are. That's something we have to revisit in the next legislative session. That was an awful outcome for us, driven largely by some of this misinformation. I think as we get more information, it will help. I think the most significant thing that will change the attitude of these legislators is the fact that the National Institutes of Health announced that they were going to embark on this investigational new drug application, which for kratom, metrogenine, in a purified form to be a therapeutic agent in fighting opioid use disorder. I think that the significance of that, and it'll take a couple of years to get to a resolution of that study, and then they can decide whether or not it becomes a new drug application. But the significance of that study is that in order to get approval, they had to pass a thorough ethics investigation by the Institutional Review Board, which is an independent scientific panel to determine that kratom was safe for administration to human subjects in a clinical trial. Very significant, and I think that it makes a huge difference in terms of what's going on. Angela asked, will the KCPA bills have a chance to be established this year? We've got a couple that are still in play. We think we certainly have a chance in Ohio. We have a chance in Massachusetts. We have a chance in North Carolina. A couple other states that we're working on. So that's something we continue to work on. These are emerging tough issues, and we're doing everything we can to scramble. We are not perfect, I'll tell you that. I think anyone who watches us, I hope you appreciate the effort. Doesn't mean that we do it right every single time, but I can tell you that we have people that call us out. I appreciate Soren's candid conversation. I think that Misty keeps us honest all of the time, making sure that we're saying it right and reporting it correctly. And so I deeply appreciate those people who are really great, absolutely great advocates for the kratom community. Craig asked what's going on with the challenging social media platforms that are limiting or prohibiting content that contains kratom references. Again, a big frustration of ours. We continue to work with Meta, YouTube, and all of the social media platforms. We're actually making some progress. They restored our Facebook page, and we're now trying to get them to recognize that this is not about assuaging the American Kratom Association. This is about recognizing the First Amendment rights of advocates to be able to freely express their opinions and how they should respect that from a constitutional perspective and not just step on us while they're allowing 708 manufacturers to advertise on their platforms and make a lot of money when they're doing it. Rand asked, does Minnesota seem like it's moving forward to a KCPA next session? Absolutely. We made really good progress there. We're still fighting with the Department of Agriculture there, but we're going to have to negotiate the regulatory framework. The sponsor of the age restriction bill was terrific. She's open to these discussions, and I think she has great influence there. We're going to keep working with you, and we're not thinking there's a ban in the horizon up there because it was very good discussions that we had with them. So I think that Ed asked, in Florida last year, they gave people time to get rid of their 708 products. Is there a time period for MGM products to be liquidated in this time? I don't think so. I hope not. I think that everyone's been on notice for a long period of time that currently they shouldn't have those products on the marketplace. So there's no leeway or grace period in that respect, because the expiration of the current rule is on the end of this month, and they just start a new rule, so there shouldn't be a gap there at all. Soren, I've already talked about. I get his point about the incarceration period. I hate that for individual citizens. So I'm going to stop there. Any that you have that are really burning that I didn't cover, just email us, and we'll get back to you with answers. I can tell you that as tough as these last 12 months have been, there are some encouraging things on the horizon. I think we need to pull together as best we can for the promotion of the natural kratom leaf products and properly extracted products. I think the FDA gets it. I think HHS gets it. I think the DEA is coming around to understanding this distinction. Because as much as we hate the FDA and kratom webpage, we hate the DEA webpage. I mean, for them to put up that kratom is a drug of concern, and never once in the past 10 years have they listed kratom as part of their annual report, which lists the drugs that are dangerous. And kratom's never made that list. And so I think that there's room for the DEA to more responsibly provide information to the public as we go forward here. So I think that's it. I'll leave it at that. I express my thanks to all of you, all of the advocates, all of you who've been here. This has been recorded, so you'll be able to watch it, circulate it to others. And I just reaffirm to all of you that I hope that you'll consider participating with us in this 10th anniversary that recognizes the 10 years of Kratom remaining legal in America, and join us in the battle to educate both the executive branch and legislators about how important it is to maintain a rational public policy moving forward. So I hope everyone will join us in that effort and make every sacrifice you can to be there with us on September 13th and 15th. Don't buy your tickets yet, but you will be clear to do that once we get some of these logistics arranged, with most principally getting a permit in order to hold a rally in Lafayette Park. And if not there, we'll find another location. So we'll let you know. I appreciate everybody, and thank you for all that you do to support keeping Kratom legal. Thanks so much.